middle of Perek Hey. Okay. So, little recap. Chapter 1, to introduce the concepts, the Alter Rebbe asked a few questions that established the premise of his thesis on the meaning of righteousness and the meaning of being a tzaddik versus a rasha, a righteous person, or a saintly person versus a sinful person, and the intermediate, the Beinoni, what we all strive to be. And he said in the end of chapter 1, that to understand the concept, we have to first introduce the players, the cast. So to do that, he introduced the soul, starting with the natural human soul, or what he refers to as the animal soul, which everyone has. And it's actually the soul that we're born with right from the start. It's the animal instinct. It's what makes us get up in the morning and eat and breathe and do whatever we do. It also has all of our typical regular human characteristics. Then in chapter 2, he introduced us to the second soul, which is the godly soul. It's referred to as the second soul because it comes to us later in life, bar bat mitzvah. It actually grows slowly. It's completely invested in us by bar and bat mitzvah. It's completed. And it also has an opinion. It has a desire, but it's not like the animal soul's desire is self-preservation and self-interest. The godly soul is very selfless. It wants what God wants because it is a piece of God, literally. The difference is that everything created, every created being is created by God's speech, as we know from the story of the first chapter of Genesis, the first chapter of the Torah. Whereas the soul, referring to the godly soul, is breathed into us, right? And he breathed into Adam the breath of life. That refers to the godly soul, which comes from far deeper, far more essential, a place more personal and more deep in God than speech. That's the godly soul. Then chapter 3, he started talking about what the soul comprises. The soul is made up of 10 attributes. For lack of a better term, you'll have to forgive the translations, but 10 soul powers, 10 soul faculties, 10 soul attributes, however you decide to word that. 3 intellectual faculties and 7 emotional faculties. The 7 emotional faculties are broken up into 2 general categories of love and fear, or kindness and discipline, kindness and severity. And the intellectual faculties are the 3 chokhmah, bina, and da'at, translated as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which we'll get into in much more detail later in Tanya. But that's also the source for the acronym Chabad. Chabad, this is just a parenthetical note, that Chabad actually isn't just an outreach movement. Chabad is a philosophy, and the Alter Rebbe, who created this philosophy, based it on this idea that the 3 levels of the intellect in the soul are called Chokhmah, Bina, Da'at. The acronym for them are Chabad, and his emphasis in creating this new philosophical movement was to pursue godliness intellectually and rationally and with your mind, so he called it the study of Chabad. That's parenthetic. That was chapter 3. Then he says there's also, in addition to the 10 soul faculties, what make up the soul's functions, 3 intellectual and 7 emotional, he then says in chapter 4 that there are also 3 functions, three expressions, three modes of expression of the soul, which are known as, in Kabbalah terms, known as the garments of the soul, which are thought, speech, and action. Thought, not to be confused with intellect, thought is the active process of thinking a thought. Speech is saying anything we say, and then action is all forms of action. Those are the ways in which the soul expresses itself, or the ways in which the soul is manifest in the human experience, if you will. The reason they're called garments is because, unlike the 10 attributes of the soul itself, unlike the Chachma, Bina, Das, and unlike the 7 emotional attributes, which together those 10 create our opinions and our feelings, which are really, they're who we are. Our opinions and our feelings are who we are. The garments of the soul are not at all who we are. They're what we do. And that's very different than who we are, because we can do things that we don't believe in. We can even say things we don't believe, and we can even think things that we don't believe. We can think a thought that we disagree with, because the expressions or the garments of the soul are external to the soul, and it can take on new expression and replace, just like you can replace an outfit. One outfit will express you in one way, another outfit will express you in a different way. Neither of them are necessarily really who you are. So the soul has 10 essential attributes or powers, 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. And then, aside from the soul powers, we have 3 soul expressions or 3 soul garments, which are not true to the soul necessarily, but they're its expressions. And then in chapters 4 and 5, he goes on to explain, the second half of chapter 4 and also chapter 5, that there's actually a real benefit. Although it seems like we're saying that the garments of the soul are on a much lower level, much less important to the neshama, to the soul. In fact, the truth is that Alter Rebbe says that there is a great benefit to the garments of the soul over the opinions and the feelings of the soul. The 10 attributes of the soul. What's the benefit of the garments of the soul? The benefit, he explains, is that no matter how well you comprehend God in your intellect, and no matter how much you love God in your feelings, you can only comprehend or reach or grasp that which God chooses to make available, that which God reveals, that which God makes available to your level of intellectual capacity. And since no created being can ever truly grasp its creator, it's just not, no human mind can ever fully comprehend God. What we do comprehend is a revelation from God, but not God himself. In Kabbalah terms, it's referred to as a ray, a shine, so a glow. You can comprehend a certain flow of divine energy. You can comprehend a certain divine revelation. But to say that in my mind I grasp God himself, intellect doesn't have that capacity. God is too big for human intellect. On the other hand, when you, for example, study Torah, since Torah is literally the will of God and the thoughts and the opinions of God, when you study Torah, what you're doing is you're actually, can you say ingesting in your mind? You're taking into your mind, you're grasping in your own mind God's intellect, which is one with God, because since God is indivisible, like we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, if God is indivisible, then he's one with his thoughts and he's one with his feelings and his desires. Then if I'm thinking God's desires and God's intellect, I'm actually grasping God in that way, which the intellect can't do. The function of thinking can, in that sense, can do that which the intellect cannot. And the same thing is with other mitzvahs. When you do a mitzvah with your hand, you're embodying divine will in your hand. Right? If I put tzedakah in the tzedakah box with my hand is now acting God's will. That's a closeness, a oneness with God that I can't possibly reach using intellectual pursuit, intellectual process. Then he started saying something even more profound, and that's where he started in chapter 5. He started explaining, like he started chapter 5 with, to understand this in a much deeper and much more clear way. He is explaining the concept of grasping God. What does it mean to grasp God? Seems like so he says, when you grasp a concept, and by the way, there should be like if I were to make a Tanya, if I were going to print my own version of the Tanya, I would put little like trigger warnings, but not a trigger warning, but like a flag, some kind of a look out, esoterica ahead. You're going to read this chapter. It's not going to be the practical stuff like this is a little more esoteric. Don't get thrown by it. But what he's explaining in chapter 5 is that there's a kind of union and a kind of oneness that happens when you process a thought that doesn't happen in any physical example. Just there's no example in the physical world of this kind of union where two things come together in a bond. We're not talking about two things becoming one. They remain two separate things, but they become so unified. And what he says is what happens with the thought process is that when I'm really heavily invested in a thought, my mind completely envelops that thought, right? My mind is completely wrapped around this subject. So the idea is enwrapped in my mind. At the same time, the reason the idea is so intense in my thought process is because the idea has captured my mind. So the idea captures my mind, and my mind envelops the idea. Usually when one thing surrounds the other, one is on the inside, one is on the outside. Only with this idea of the thought processing, with the thought process, processing an idea, can you have the idea envelop the thought and the thought process, and the thought process enveloping the idea at the same time. So the bond between, the connection between my thinking and the idea that I'm thinking is that my thinking envelops the thought, and my thinking is enveloped by the thought at the same time. So it's a connection that doesn't exist in any physical context, because it can't. It's impossible in a physical sense. But with regards to the intellect and an idea, it is possible. Now, if the idea happens to be godliness, not just godliness, but God himself, because God is one with his opinions and his feelings, then when I think thoughts of Torah, my mind is both enveloped in and enveloping this God detail, which is pretty awesome. That's where we're up to in chapter 5. Right in the middle of the chapter, roughly.
Can I ask you a question?
You can try, but so far this is super esoteric stuff.
I mean, I guess it's like maybe a silly theological question, but it's like, could you even say that divine intellect, so to speak, like thoughts, opinions, feelings, is that a human thing? Is that a divine thing? Is there actually a discernment that one is human, one is divine? Because the moment you say like God's thoughts and opinions and whatever, doesn't that make God into a human?
On the contrary, that's how we reflect him. we're created in his image. So the reason we have thoughts is because he has. And the reason we have feelings is because he has. Of course, our thoughts and our feelings are nothing like his, but certainly he has. That's why we do. If he didn't have thoughts and feelings, we wouldn't either, because we're created in his image.
Very trippy.
Okay, so now we're up to the words, in Hebrew, we're up to the words, V'zois ma'ala yasera. This is a great benefit. How does that second column start on that page? The right column on that, yeah, all the way up on top, yeah.
Hence the special superiority.
Yeah, the special superiority. That part. You see that? Anybody ever have it? V'zot ma'ala yasera. Got it? Okay. So some of you will read it in English, some of you will read it in Hebrew. I'm going to read it in Ashkenazi. This is the great superiority, a wondrous advantage, an infinite advantage. That the mitzvah of knowing Torah and grasping Torah has over all the other mitzvahs. Remember, we talked last week, we were talking about, is it really possible that one mitzvah is equal to all the other mitzvahs? A bunch of different examples of how the Torah says that in many different contexts. In one context, it's the study of Torah that's equivalent to all the mitzvahs. In another context, it's the mitzvah of Shabbos that's equivalent to all the mitzvahs. In another context, it's mitzvah of tefillin that's equivalent to all the mitzvahs. So he's going to explain how, in what context, at least in one example of how, in a sense, Torah is equal to all the other mitzvahs combined, or it has an advantage over all the other mitzvahs. This advantage that the study of Torah and the knowledge and the grasping of Torah has is an advantage even over those mitzvahs that are speech mitzvahs of speech, like prayer. It's even an advantage over the mitzvah of Torah study itself in the verbal sense, right? There's a mitzvah to say words of Torah, which, by the way, I don't know if you remember in the first class when we started learning Tanya, I told you that the reason we're going to go through the text of the Tanya is that you can say the words also, because there's a tremendous virtue and benefit and spiritual effect and achievement that you affect when you say the words of Torah. So as we're going through this, you should actually try to say some of the words. Like he says here, I feel a mitzvah is Talmud Torah b'dibur. Saying the words of Torah is a mitzvah. When you're studying Torah, you're supposed to say it. There's also the mitzvah to memorize Torah words, so that when you're not studying Torah, you're standing online at the DMV, you can be reciting Torah. That's a lot of Torah you have to memorize when you're on the line at the DMV. But even you're walking, you're taking a walk, you're walking on the cliffs. You should always have Torah in your arsenal, in your quiver, that you can recite by heart, by memory, words of Torah. Because first of all, it's a mitzvah to recite words of Torah, and second of all, the previous Rebbe explains that when you recite words of Torah, you're actually, it's like an air purifier. You're spiritually purifying your environment. So if you're in a place, she's not here, so I can talk about it. My wife is extraordinarily good at this. Whenever she's in a place that she's never been before, with the kids or whatever, she's always reciting words of Tanya that she knows by heart, or Mishnah, or whatever. It's an important thing to do. You purify the air, you purify the environment in which you find yourself by reciting words of Torah. Back to the text. So the mitzvah of knowing Torah and grasping Torah has a certain advantage over the mitzvah of speaking words of Torah, or any other mitzvah, any other action-related mitzvah. What is the advantage? Because all the mitzvahs, whether they be a mitzvah of speech or a mitzvah of action, God enclothes the soul, and the light of God completely envelops the soul from its head to its toes, because the soul is engaged in an act of a mitzvah. So while it's engaged in the act of a mitzvah, it's performing God's will, so it is enveloped in God in that moment. But in the knowing, in the knowledge of Torah study, of Torah information, aside from the fact that your intellect is enclosed in the wisdom of God, in godly wisdom, but also God's wisdom is now in you, right? We have that double connection. Whatever, to whatever extent your intellect can grasp and can reach, can perceive, and it envelops in the intellect to the extent that it can, whatever it is that the particular individual we're talking about, to whatever extent that individual, you or me, have the capacity to comprehend in Torah, to that extent, the soul is enwrapped in that level of Torah knowledge and that level of godliness. Each person according to their intellectual capacity, and the strength of their knowledge and their understanding. But pardes in all of the four levels of Torah. What is pardes? Anybody remember? Pardes literally means an orchard. Pshat, remez, drash, sod. Pshat is the literal meaning of the words of Torah. Remez means what's hinted in the words. Drash is commentary, and sod is the secrets of the Torah. Now, because through knowing Torah, the Torah is enclosed in the soul of man and the intellect, and is wrapped up within them. Therefore, nikras b'shem lechem umazon hanefesh. That's why Torah information is called the bread and the food, the sustenance of the soul. Just like physical bread, zones haguf, it feeds the body, it sustains the body. When you take it into yourself literally, not only does it sustain it, but there it is convertedly. When you eat food, the food becomes part of you. And then the person can live and can be sustained. By the way, what happens if the food that you take in does not become one with you? You got a problem. Either it does or it doesn't. But if it doesn't, it's actually the opposite of life-giving, right? Food that gets stuck in you is not healthy. So he's emphasizing it's not just that Torah information is bouncing around in your head and no, you actually grasp it. You grasp it, you receive it, you contain it. It becomes assimilated into who you are, into your opinions, your thoughts.
There's that whole campaign, you are what you eat.
Yeah. So you are what you think. The same is true with the knowledge of Torah and its grasp, its understanding. B'nefesh adam, in the soul of man, a person who studies well and in depth with his or her intellect, to the point where it is captured in the mind and it is unified. It becomes one with the mind. And they become one thing where you can't differentiate anymore between your opinions and the Torah information. You start to think like the Torah that you studied. Then naase, it becomes mazon lanefesh, food for the soul, v'chayim b'kirba, and it's the life within it. Mechaye hachayim ein sof baruch hu, from the source of all life, the infinite one, blessed be He. Hamelubash b'chachmasay v'tordasay shebekirba, who is enclosed in the intellect and the Torah that is now within you. You see the process? You see where he's going with this? God is one with his own opinions. God is his opinions. He invests his thoughts and his opinions in the Torah. So the Torah is filled with God's essence. You then study words of Torah with your intellect. If you can really grasp the words that you're studying, or to whatever, not if you can, to whatever extent you are able to grasp the words and the concepts that you're studying, the godliness of those words, or the God in those words, is now sustaining your soul, just like food sustains the body. And that's what the verse means when it says in Psalms, King David says, your Torah is in my innards. It's a bizarre expression. Why would King David say, Torah is in my kishkas? Why would he say that? The answer is because that's exactly what happens. Torah becomes what sustains me. It's so complete. What happens to you when you study Torah is so complete that if you study Torah correctly and enough, you start to function like an agent of Torah, which is an amazing thing. So, just for purposes of illustration, people love to talk. Huh?
Is this considered studying Torah, or are we studying about studying Torah?
Yes.
Both.
Both.
Very much. Yeah, very much both. People like to talk about stories of how the righteous, the holy people can, perform miracles. The prophets perform miracles. The saintly perform miracles. Miraculous stories of tremendous, There's no question that there are miracles. That there are miracle workers. There are people who perform miracles. They have that kind of access to godliness, and they perform. But not every story that you hear of a tzaddik performing a miracle is actually a miracle. Sometimes it's far simpler than that. I'll give you an example. A story, people often refer to this as a miracle story, right? A chassid back in Eastern Europe went to, I believe it was the second Chabad Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe is who wrote this, the Alter Rebbe's son. I think it was him. And he told them that the doctors had diagnosed him with a lung disease and told him that it was terminal. And he wanted to know what to do. So the Rebbe told him, you should move to Israel. The Rebbe asked him specifics, like, tell me exactly what the symptoms are, what the disease is, and he told him. The Rebbe said, I think you should move to Israel. So he said, okay, I'm moving, but what's the point? What is moving to Israel going to do? Is the air better there? I mean, was it like? So the Rebbe said, no, nothing to do with the air being better, but the disease that you just described to me is discussed in halacha with regards to whether an animal that is slaughtered and then inspected to see whether it's kosher or not is kosher. Because if you slaughter an animal, if an animal is already terminally ill, it's not kosher. No matter if you slaughter it correctly or not, it's not kosher. So halacha discusses, if you slaughter an animal and you open it up and you look at what's going on there and you discover that it has a certain problem, is it kosher or not? And the disease that you just described is debated in halacha. There is an opinion in halacha, the Ashkenazi opinion is that this disease is terminal. The Sephardic opinion in halacha is that the disease that you just described is not terminal. Because you're living in a country that is religiously under Ashkenazi rule, the doctors tell you that it's a terminal disease. But if you move to Israel, where the halacha there goes according to the Sephardic rule, the doctors there will tell you it's not terminal. And you'll be fine. And he moved to Israel and he was fine. So is that a miracle or not?
It's a miracle that he understood it to describe it, but common sense in that like.
What it is that the world was created by Torah, right? God wrote the Torah first and then created the world based on what it says in Torah. That's the Talmud says. He looked into the Torah and created the world. The Torah is the blueprint for the world. Torah is still being developed, right? New halachic rulings. The question is, do those new halachic rulings have any real relevance in the physical world? The answer is, of course, Torah creates the world. So when someone makes a ruling in Torah, that actually creates reality. Which means if you grasp Torah well enough and enough, quantitatively and qualitatively enough, you become part of God's process of creating the world. Because as the Torah continues to unpack and unfold, reality responds. Just like reality responded when God said, "Let there be light," reality responds when God says, "This animal is kosher." It's not just a spiritual reality, it's a physical reality. So if you study Torah properly and you ingest it, so to speak, completely, and you literally assimilate it into your being, then when you study Torah, you're actually continuing the process of the creation of the world. You're impacting creation because you've completely merged with the Torah you're studying.
But the creation is happening, right?
Constantly.
What we study.
Right.
And so, of course, it will be developed.
It will be developing. Yeah. So in that sense, what the rabbi did in that story is not a miracle. He's simply following the law.
But the law is to understand.
So if you grasp the Torah properly, then two things. First of all, reality responds to how you're ruling based on your understanding and knowledge of Torah. And second of all, you know how to handle issues that come up based on Torah ruling. Now, a similar story is there was one of the great, not many people in Jewish history were known as the Gaon. Gaon means the genius. A lot of people were referred to, oh, he's a Gaon. That guy, he's a Gaon. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who become known as the Gaon of whatever, right? The genius of, so there was one rabbi named the genius of Rogachev, the Gaon of Rogachev. One time he received a notice from the government, wherever Rogachev is, I don't know what country that's in, what country Rogachev is in? Whatever country it's in, he received a notice from the tax collector. He never made it to America. No. He never came to America. It's either somewhere in Middle East, in Eastern Europe.
What's the name?
Rogachev. In any case, he once received a notice from the government that he owed a certain amount of he hadn't paid taxes properly, and he owed a big tax bill. He reviewed it, he looked at it, he thought about it, he reviewed it, and then said, "Can't be. That's not ethical. There's something. It's not possible. I don't owe that money." Because he thought about it, processed it through Torah law, and he said, "Nope, doesn't work." And 3 days later, he got a letter in the mail saying, "Sorry, pardon the letter you received a couple of days ago. It was an error. It was a mistake. We miscalculated. You don't owe anything."
That for sure didn't happen in America.
No, that didn't happen. In America, that would be a miracle story. The point is that when you understand Torah well enough, the world responds to your understanding of Torah, not the other way around. What's the age of the universe? Science says that it's whatever. The Torah says it's whatever. So what do? We have to kind of modify our understanding of Torah to match what, if your understanding of Torah is on this level, then you're going to try to modify your understanding of Torah to match what the scientists are saying. If your understanding of Torah is where it really can be, given the potential that the human mind has and the availability of Torah, reality responds to Torah. Torah is not bent to fit into our experience of the world. It's the other way around. Like these stories point out, Torah actually affects reality. Where do I come into play? If I can really comprehend and conceive of the concepts in Torah thoroughly enough and deeply enough and merge with them the way that Alter Rebbe is describing here, then it's not a benefit, it's just a fact that I I become an agent of Torah. I become an extension of the Torah that I'm studying.
Belarus. Eastern Belarus.
Eastern Belarus. Good. Thank you. Got fact checkers on live fact checking.
Learn as we go.
Basically, Russian, depending on the week.
Right.
Right.
By the way, in the human experience, we have needs, internal needs and external needs. What I mean by that is we need to eat and drink. Those are internal. We also need food and shelter. Those are external, right? They're all needs.
Isn't food and eating?
What did I say?
Food.
I said food and eating. I meant food and drink.
Shelter, extra.
Okay, so food and drink. I'm sorry. So food and drink are internal, and clothing and shelter are external. Did I say food and
I
clothing?
think you said eating,
Okay.
for internal and then food.
Sorry. So eating and drinking are internal needs. We all need to eat and drink, and we all need clothing and shelter. What's the difference between them? The difference is that eating is, like we're talking about, becomes literally part of you. It's inside you. It's literally, it merges with you completely. Clothing, it protects you. It helps you. It's necessary. You need it, but it doesn't merge with you. It remains external to you. It will never become part of who you are. It's external. And the same thing with shelter. Shelter doesn't become part of who you are. And even within the context of the external needs, the clothing and the shelter, the clothing is closer to you than the shelter is. Which is why clothing needs to be tailored to the individual. Shelter doesn't. Everybody can live in the same kind of house. Not everybody can wear the same kind of clothing. If the wrong person wears the wrong size clothing, the clothing can become an impediment, or can not protect properly. So clothing is closer to me, which is why it's more tailored to me. It's more directed and more personal. Whereas shelter is so far away that it can be anything, as long as it covers, as long as it blocks the rain. And so, continuing the text, keep that in mind. The Torah is the food, the sustenance for the neshama that toils in Torah in this world and studies the Torah lishma. Lishma means for its own sake, which we'll come back to. Like it says in Zohar, Daf Resh Yud, as is mentioned in the Zohar. Ulishma hainu, what does lishma mean? There are many different reasons to study Torah. For example, I study Torah because I need to know how to observe Shabbos. So I need to open the book of Code of Jewish Law or the Talmud. I need to study to find out what to do. So I can study Torah for the purpose of knowing how to serve Hashem. Got to know what to do. That's a noble reason to study Torah. Another reason to study Torah is I'm a teacher. I get paid to. So I need to study in order to teach, because another reason to study Torah is because if I give a really good sermon, people will congratulate me and respect me. So it's a good ego booster. There are all kinds of reasons to study Torah, some more and some less noble. Studying Torah lishma, what does that mean? For its own sake? Meaning for the right reason? He says, the correct reason to study Torah, lishma, for its own sake, is for the purpose of connecting my soul to God through understanding Torah. That's it. Ish kefi sichloi, each person according to their ability, as it says in Kabbalah. That's the proper version of studying Torah. Vehamazon, and food, in the parentheses now, and the food, the sustenance, hi bechinas or pnimi. That is, again, pardon the esoterica and the Kabbalah language, that is the internal light. The light that penetrates internally. V'halevushim bechinas makifim, and the clothing are the kind of godly light that surrounds. V'lachein Amru Razal, and that's why the sages say sheTalmud Torah shakol keneged kol hamitzvot, that the study of Torah is equal to all the mitzvahs together. Why? Lefi, because shehamitzvahs hein levushim levad, because mitzvahs, just a regular performance of a mitzvah, is only a garment. V'haTorah hi mozain v'gam levush, but Torah study is the food and also a garment. Lenefesh hamaskelas, to the soul that understands it. Shemes labish ba, that is enclosed in it, be'iyuna v'limuda, in studying it and analyzing it. And especially when you not only are thinking the words and grasping the words, but you're also speaking the words. Shehevel hadibur nasa b'chinas or makif, because the speech becomes another kind of encompassing light, as it is explained in Kabbalah. What he's saying here is that when you perform any mitzvah, when you perform a mitzvah, you're enveloped by the godliness of that mitzvah. That's a garment, right? It's like you're enclosed in the holiness of the mitzvah, which is what we refer to here as the or makif, the enveloping light, right? The light surrounds you. When you study Torah and the concepts are assimilated into your intellect and you really grasp it and you get it, the light is within you, right? Now you've taken in the light, so it's an or pnimi. It's a much deeper, personal kind of light. But let's be honest. How lofty a concept could it be if you can comprehend it? What's a higher kind of godly revelation or godly light? The kind that you can understand, or the kind that's way beyond you? Obviously, the divine revelation, or the divine the wisdom in the Torah. When you study a piece of Torah, there's the extent to which you do understand it, and then, pardon me. Then there's the Torah that you don't understand. There's the part of the study that you don't understand. The part of the Torah that you don't understand because it's bigger than you. It's higher than you. So what's a greater revelation? What's more godly? What's higher? The part you do understand or the part you don't understand? Clearly, the part you don't understand. So why are we talking about the light that you take in as being so awesome? Because you're literally taking it in. If you're literally taking it in, that means it's not all that lofty, right? Makes sense? So the Alter Rebbe is saying that's the beauty of Torah study. That's the advantage of Torah study. When you study Torah properly, you're getting every possible advantage. Not only are you getting the advantage of the Torah that you're taking in, and it's the internal light, and it's becoming literally one with you, but obviously that's got its limitations, because if you can understand it, it can't be that great. You're also getting the benefit of the Torah that remains external and remains in this enveloping state, bigger than you. You also have the benefit of that divine light, or the divine aura or energy that comes to you from reciting the words of Torah that you don't understand.
Let's define Torah.
Hold on, let me finish this thought. And then on top of that, there's a third benefit. There's a third benefit, which is in the enveloping light, the or makif, there are two levels. There's the part that is somewhat relatable to you, like clothing, and then there's the stuff that's just beyond completely, like shelter. And in Torah study, you get both, because the part of Torah that's completely beyond, you get that benefit also by simply reciting the words, by performing the mitzvah of speaking words of Torah, you reach that level as well. You get that benefit as well. So studying Torah, it has a triple benefit, or a double benefit, and one of the two is a two-part. It's part 1A and part 1B, and then part 2. So the part 2 is you've enveloped Torah within you. You've taken it in. You're now thinking and feeling thoughts and desires that God has. Thoughts of Torah. And there's the part you don't understand, but you're studying it anyways. That's the stuff that remains outside of you. It's the light, it's the divine light that encompasses and surrounds. And then there is simply the fact of the performance of the mitzvah of reciting words of Torah, which is that third level, the distant surrounding light, like the shelter. So unlike other mitzvahs where you just get the near external encompassing light, like the clothing, right? The garments where if I give tzedakah with my hand is enclosed in the holiness of the mitzvah of tzedakah. You light your Shabbos candles, your hands are enveloped in the mitzvah are enclosed in the mitzvah of lighting the Shabbos candles. With the giving of, with the study of Torah, you get that benefit, and also the benefit of the greater enveloping light, the light of, I guess, the spiritual equivalent to the shelter, the more distant, which means also more essentially divine, because the closer it is to you, that means the farther it is from the essence of God, right? So you get both external benefits and the internal benefits from the mitzvah of studying Torah, which is why the study of Torah is so much greater and equivalent to all the other mitzvahs combined. This whole chapter 5 was a little bit of a detour, kind of a parenthetical comment, and then chapter 6 gets back to the original conversation of Tanya, which the souls and the function of the souls and how we relate to them, et cetera, et cetera.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the stuff that you don't understand isn't like you keep studying it in the hope that you'll start to grasp meaning out of it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like it just always stays out there.
Right. But you know that there is, not only there are subjects that you won't understand, there are levels of depth within the subject that you do understand that you're not going to understand. And that benefit always remains. There's a beautiful story about one of the Rebbes who I think it was the same Mittler Rebbe, if I'm not mistaken, who his father, by his bar mitzvah, his father offered him a bar mitzvah gift. Don't ask me how this works, because it's above my pay grade, but he offered him a gift for his bar mitzvah. He would bequeath him some of his Torah knowledge. Maybe download it or something, I don't know. So the young boy thought about it and then said, no, thank you. A little while later, he comes back to his father, maybe it was his grandfather, it's a mathetic, comes back and he says, can we revisit that offer you made me the other day? So his father said, why? Why are we revisiting it? He says, I realized I made a silly mistake. The reason I said no is because I learned that you're supposed to work hard. You're supposed to toil over Torah, not get it easily. So I didn't want to get it as a gift just easily. I wanted to work hard to get the Torah that I know. But then I rethought about it again, and I realized Torah is infinite. No matter how much you gift to me, I can work for the rest of my life on the rest of it. So sure, I'll take whatever you have to offer, and I'll work hard for the rest of my life. So it's not only that there are subjects in Torah that we can't understand. Even in a subject that I understand perfectly, there is a depth that I don't even know I'm missing. And no matter how deep I go, there's always more that I don't realize I don't know. So in that sense, the Torah is always, whenever you study a piece of Torah, even when you do understand it, there's always that which you don't understand together with that which you did understand. So you're always getting both of these benefits, as long as you're understanding something to some extent. There is, of course, like I said, there's the mitzvah of simply reciting the words of Torah without understanding them at all. There's that mitzvah also. But here he's talking about, here he's not, the basic conversation here is not about the mitzvah of studying Torah, it's the mitzvah of knowing Torah, which you have to know it on some level. And even while you do, you don't know all the other levels. So you have those two benefits.
How do you know that you don't understand?
How do you know what you don't know? Torah is the kind of thing where the more you know, the more you come to know how much you don't know. That's the nature of Torah.
So basically.